We're counting down the top 10 Soviet vehicles that shaped World War II's bloodiest front. These were not just machines. They were the backbone of a war fought in ice, mud, famine, and fire. From simple armoured cars and flawed early tanks to legendary battle machines and bizarre winter prototypes, each entry shows how Soviet engineering evolved under relentless attack. Some of these vehicles became world famous, while others stayed hidden in the shadows of history. If you love deep military breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe. It helps us bring more frontline history to you. Let's begin our countdown with the vulnerable light tanks that marked the Soviet Union's desperate opening moves. The T-26, BT-5, BT-7 and T-50 light tanks formed the backbone of Soviet armoured forces at the outbreak of war. The T-26, with its 15 to 22 millimeters of armour, was a veteran of earlier conflicts but stood little chance against German anti-tank guns in 1941. Its thin plates and slow speed made it an easy target, and more than 1,600 T-26s rolled off production lines only to be decimated in the opening months. The BT series, known as fast tanks, could hit 53 kilometers per hour on roads thanks to their Christie suspension, but their 13 millimeters of armor proved just as fragile. Speed alone could not save them in the chaos of retreat. The T-50, intended as a modern replacement, featured better protection and a rotating turret, but only 41 were built before Soviet engineers shifted focus. Each of these early designs revealed a hard truth: light armor and speed were no match for German firepower. Their losses forced Soviet designers to rethink everything, setting the stage for a new generation of tanks. The T-34 burst onto the battlefield with features no one had seen before. Its 45mm armor was set at a 60-degree angle, giving it the real-world protection of nearly 80mm, enough to shrug off most German anti-tank guns in 1941. Wide, 500mm tracks let it glide over mud and snow that bogged down enemy vehicles. Under the hood, a V2 diesel engine delivered power, range, and a much lower risk of fire than gasoline engines. Simplicity ruled every detail, with cast and welded holes, standardized parts, and a design that could be built by thousands in factories relocated deep in the Urals. Over 15,000 T-34s rolled off Soviet lines during the war, making it not just a tank, but a symbol of mass production. In 1944, the T-34-85 arrived with a new turret and an 85mm gun, able to punch through 110mm of armour at 500 metres. German crews learned to fear its silhouette and its numbers. When German panzers first met the KV-1 their shells bounced off 75 to 90mm of armour. At Raseiniai in 1941, a lone KV tank blocked an entire division for hours, forcing the Germans to bring up 88mm guns just to break through. The KV-2 took the concept further, mounting a massive 152mm howitzer in a turret so heavy it could barely turn on uneven ground. These giants could smash bunkers and shrug off early anti-tank fire, but their weight and slow speed made them vulnerable to breakdowns and flanking attacks. By 1943, Soviet engineers introduced the IS series. The IS-1 brought thicker armour and an 85mm gun, but it was the IS-2 that truly changed the game. With a 122mm gun capable of blasting through Tiger tanks and fortifications alike, nearly 2,300 IS-2s rolled out before war's end. Heavy tanks opened the path for infantry, battered German lines, and proved that raw firepower, no matter the cost, could break the deadlock on the Eastern Front. Soviet self-propelled guns rewrote the rules of armoured firepower by mounting big guns on tank chassis and skipping the complexity of a turret. The Su-76, with over 13,000 built, became a staple on every major front. Its open-top design and 76mm gun offered fast mobile artillery support that could be produced in a fraction of the hours needed for a full tank. The Su-85 introduced an 85mm gun for hunting German armour. The Su-100 carried a 100mm weapon with enough punch to take out Panthers and Tigers from a distance. For smashing bunkers and strongpoints, The Su-122, with its 122mm howitzer, delivered devastating high explosive shells. At the top end, the ISU-152 earned the nickname Beast Killer for its 152mm gun. One shot could obliterate a tank or level a fortified position. By building casemate self-propelled guns in such numbers, the Soviets delivered cost-effective, versatile firepower exactly where it was needed. Speed and stealth often decided who survived on the Eastern Front, and Soviet armoured cars became the eyes and ears of advancing armies. The Bay-10, with its 45mm gun and 10mm armour, could punch above its weight in short-range skirmishes, but the thin plating left crews exposed if they lingered too long. The lighter BA-20 reached up to 90 km per hour, darting ahead of columns to scout enemy positions, though its armour rarely stopped more than small arms fire. By 1942, the BA-64 took over as the Red Army's primary scout car. Compact and agile, it could hit 80 km per hour on open roads, with 6 to 9mm of armour, just enough to deflect shrapnel and rifle rounds. Over 3,600 BA-64s rolled off the lines, slipping through mud and snow to relay vital intelligence. These vehicles traded firepower for mobility, proving that in war, information could be as valuable as armour. American and British vehicles poured into the Soviet Union by the thousands, changing the pace and reach of Red Army offensives. The Studebaker US-6 truck, with nearly 200,000 delivered, became the backbone of Soviet logistics, hauling ammunition, fuel and troops through mud and snow where homegrown trucks bogged down. The M4 Sherman, about 4,100 strong in Soviet service, offered a reliable, easy-to-maintain tank that crews respected for its comfort and visibility, even if its gun fell short of the T-34's punch. The nimble M3 Stuart, with 1,676 delivered, filled reconnaissance and support roles, prized for its mechanical reliability despite its light armament. Over 3,300 universal carriers gave Soviet infantry armoured mobility, running supplies and wounded across shell-torn ground. These Lend-Lease workhorses did not just supplement Soviet production, they kept the Red Army moving, bridging the gap between factory and frontline when every kilometre counted. Behind every Soviet advance stood a fleet of trucks and heavy tractors powering the Red Army's relentless push west. The Jazz AA, with its 1.5-ton payload, became the standard lifeline for frontline troops, hauling ammunition, food and wounded men across battered roads. The larger ZIS-5, able to carry up to 3 tons, kept artillery and mechanised units rolling even when the mud threatened to swallow everything. But it was the tracked Comintern and the Voroshilovets that moved the heaviest guns. Comintern tractors pulled loads over 60 tons, while the Voroshilovets could tow artillery pieces weighing up to 120 tons, enough to reposition massive 203mm howitzers for the next barrage. Without these workhorses, Soviet offensives would have stalled in the mud and snow. Supplies, guns and reinforcements arrived because these machines never stopped, no matter how harsh the terrain or the weather. Some of the most unusual Soviet vehicles never made it past the prototype stage, or they saw only brief, awkward service. The T-35, a 5-turreted giant, looked like a rolling fortress, but it proved hopelessly impractical. With only about 65 built, its size and complexity turned every breakdown into a logistical nightmare. And in combat, coordinating 5 separate gun crews led to chaos rather than concentrated firepower. The T-28, a 3-turret medium tank, fared little better. Around 500 were produced, but the multi-turret approach added weight and confusion without real battlefield advantage. Both designs quickly revealed that simplicity and focus beat spectacle on the battlefield. Then came the NKL Erasani, propeller-driven sleds that skimmed over snow at up to 60 kilometers per hour. These winter machines delivered supplies and performed reconnaissance where nothing else could move, though their open frames left crews dangerously exposed. Each of these oddities captured Soviet willingness to try almost anything once, even if it meant learning hard lessons on the front lines. As German armies swept across the Western Soviet Union in 1941, entire factories vanished overnight. In a feat unmatched in modern history, Soviet officials ordered the evacuation of 1,500 industrial plants, including machine tools, blueprints, and tens of thousands of workers, hauled more than 1,600 kilometers east by rail. Locomotives thundered through winter darkness, carrying the heart of tank production from Kharkov to Chelyabinsk and beyond. Workers rebuilt assembly lines in freezing sheds, often with nothing but tents for shelter and ration cards for food. Within weeks, the first tanks began rolling out of the Urals, even as the ground was still frozen beneath their tracks. This industrial exodus saved Soviet armour from destruction and allowed mass production to continue under bombardment. Without the frantic relocation to Tankograd, the Red Army would have faced the Wehrmacht with empty hands. The story of Soviet vehicles is inseparable from the factories that gave them life, forged in hardship and moved by rail to the edge of survival. Soviet factories turned out 105,000 tanks during World War II. This staggering output was more than any other nation in history. It included not just the legendary T-34s, but a triad of vehicles, tanks for the breakthrough, self-propelled guns for fire support, and trucks and tractors to keep the front supplied. Soviet armour did not just win battles, it shaped the post-war world, with exports reaching more than 40 countries and influencing tank design for decades. The true legacy of these machines lies in the way quantity, adaptability, and raw determination overcame every obstacle the Eastern Front could throw at them. Across all these vehicles, one truth stands out. Soviet victory depended on relentless adaptation. Designs changed overnight, factories moved by the thousands, and every machine became a weapon of survival. That urgent innovation still shapes military engineering today. The legacy of these wartime machines is endurance under fire.